3 spine-chilling tales of terrifying isolation. Discover the sinister secrets of the haunted woods in the quaint suburb of Maple Grove, where each house had its own garden and every door held a friendly smile. There was a shadow creeping in Parsons Woods. Sarah Johnson, a single mother working the night shift at the hospital, had begun to feel the chill of isolation that whispered in the wind. Her calm world shattered when the messages started. Cryptic warnings about the woods slithered into her phone, sending her heart racing stories of missing people, swallowed by the trees. At first, she dismissed them. Just silly folklore, right? But then the tension in the air pulsed around her, heavy and foreboding. Every neighbor she passed on her late-night run seemed to hasten their steps, avoiding her gaze. They knew something she didn't. Days rolled onward, each bringing new layers of dread. It was as if the woods held a sinister breath, thick with secrets waiting to snatch her and her son, Kyle, away. Once a sweet refuge for picnics and laughter, the forest now loomed like a beast ready to strike. Kyle was oblivious to her fears, wrapped up in the usual teenage bravado. He laughed at her warnings, eager for the thrill of exploration with his friends. How could she protect him when he ventured forth, heedless of the dangers lurking behind the trees? As Sarah drove home each night, her nerves tensed at the sight of the tree line, now an ominous curtain draped over their lives. She could hear the whispers in her head, a voice urging her to shield Kyle somehow, to keep him close. But the texts intensified, each more urgent and personal than the last. They were like a noose tightening around her heart. The hands on the clock moved too slow during her shifts, every minute a little slice of dread. What is happening to my life? She gasped to herself one late night, her fingers trembling as she stared at the screen. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The night unfolded like a nightmare when Kyle didn't come home. Each ring of her phone was a tease, a heartbeat of false hope. Her hands quaked as she dialed his friends. No answers. Panic raced through her veins. The police shrugged off her fears, muttering about typical teenage folly, but Sarah's stomach knotted. The fear pulsed in her ears with every tick of the clock. How could they sleep easy, knowing the darkness folded like a blanket over the woods? Desperate and shaking, she ventured toward the threatening cover of the trees. The familiar path was now unrecognizable, as if the woods conspired against her, drawing her in. As she stepped deeper, the branches loomed overhead, twisting and creaking like skeletal fingers ready to grab. The darkness swallowed her voice as she called out for Kyle. Suddenly, a flicker caught her eye, a shadow darting between the trees. Heart thudding, she took a trembling breath. Kyle! The silence that followed echoed back with mocking clarity. Something wicked lay in wait, and she could feel it, hear its whispers just beyond the edge of her perception. As a figure loomed closer, a glimmer of treachery shone under the moonlight. Was it Kyle? Or was it something else? Sarah's heart raced. Choices had to be made, her world balanced on a knife's edge. What secrets did Parsons Woods cradle, and would she be willing to face the horrors whispered in her darkest fears? The figure advanced into the pale glow of the moonlight, stepping cautiously, as if testing the ground beneath. A long, shadowy silhouette, it twisted and swayed like a marionette, inhaling the darkness around it. Sarah squinted, searching for the features, but all that met her gaze was an unsettling blur. Kyle! She yelled again, her voice cracking, desperation swelling within. Then, a low, guttural laugh echoed through the trees, not from the figure, but from somewhere deeper within the woods. It sent chills down her spine, her instincts screaming that she shouldn't be here. Clenching her fists, Sarah took a step toward the silhouette. Please. Mom. The muffled voice broke through the terror, pulling the weight of her heart against her rib cage. It sounded like Kyle, but the laugh still echoed in her mind. It couldn't be. He emerged from the shadows, face pale, eyes wide with confusion. His clothes were dirty and torn, but at that moment, the sight of him made her heart soar. Relief rushed through her. Kyle! Thank God! She dashed forward, but remembered the laughter, the weight of looming dread. She halted mid-stride, noting the flickering shadows beyond him. Mom, what are you doing here? Kyle stammered, glancing behind him as if something lurked just out of view. The boy's expression told her everything. He, too, felt the growing chill. Just stay close to me. She took a step backward, her body primed for flight. The comforting spatial awareness she once had was long gone. But just then, two figures appeared, their movements elegant yet unnaturally fluid. The woods seemed to breathe with them, wind shifting low, whispering secrets, coaxing Sarah's trembling spines to align with dread. The figures moved as shadows did, seamlessly blending into the darkness, only the glints of their eyes illuminating the night. Who are you? Sarah exclaimed. The world fell silent again, replaced by the dampening tension. Things that were, things that are, one figure spoke, its voice smooth like honey with a sinister undertone. You are on hallowed ground, a sacred place. What does that mean? Her voice came out as a gasp, quaking with the weight of fear. They're taking what's rightfully theirs, the second figure claimed. You don't belong here, nor does he, it said, pointing at Kyle. You disturbed the silence of the woods. She just wants to find her son. A part inside Sarah fought back against the suffocating fear. No. We're leaving. But the moment was shattered when the laughter returned, deeper now, a thrumming sound resonating through the trees. Kyle clung to his mother, breathing heavily. She felt the heartbeat of her own panic match the rhythmic pulses of the forest. A shadowy figure, cloaked in darkness, seemed to rise from the ground beneath her, engulfing her vision in blackness. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't think. The trees, once looming monsters, appeared to shift their stances, leaning closer, whispering promises of secrets long buried. What do you want? She shouted, her voice shattering through the eerie laughter permeating the air like a poisonous fog. The figures drew closer, shadows melding, and she felt their posturing intentions dangerously keen and predatory. You will learn, dear Sarah. You will learn. And when you do, with a surge of instinct, Sarah grabbed Kyle's hand and ran blindly through the maze of trees. She ran until her legs felt like lead, until the laughter faded into the distance, but ominous murmurs lingered behind. Were they close? Had she escaped, or merely stumbled into a different part of the woods, into something worse? As they broke through the edge of Parson's Woods, the familiar sights of Maple Grove appeared distorted, colors dimmed, and the air felt heavy with a thick, unnatural silence. Sarah looked at Kyle, whose face remained pale and shadowed. Mom, did you see? What were they? But a sudden chill gripped her heart, tightening its hold. We need to get home now. In the back of her mind, she could almost hear the figures' whispers warning her this wasn't over. The woods would demand their reckoning. The shadows lurked, waiting, and whatever ancient bond existed between them and her family wouldn't easily be severed. They hurried away, but fear clung to Sarah's skin like mist, an insatiable dread swirling within. Behind them, the whispers grew louder, echoing curses that promised this was just the beginning. Would she be able to protect Kyle from whatever darkness was now entwined with their lives? Or were they destined to return, to delve deeper into the chilling heart of the haunted woods? The question hung heavily in the dense silence. As they stumbled away from the suffocating shadows of Parson's Woods, the oppressive silence wrapped around them tighter than ever. Each step Sarah took felt like wading through thick, invisible fog. The moonlight painted eerie patterns across the ground, and every rustle of leaves sent jolts of adrenaline racing through her veins. Mom, I don't like it. Kyle's voice trembled, cutting through the stillness. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if he expected to see the figures leaping from the shadows behind them. I know, she whispered, trying to mask her own unease. But how could she reassure him when every instinct screamed at her to run faster? Clenching her jaw, she pulled Kyle closer, their feet stumbling over the uneven path that led home. Suddenly, a low thrum of laughter broke through the silence once more, this time echoing from all directions, inescapable and all-consuming. "They won't let you go," it layered slowly over the night air like a predator stalking its prey. Sarah froze, her body instinctively mimicking a deer caught in headlights. Kyle's grip on her hand tightened. "Don't look back. Just keep walking," she urged, trying her best to sound fierce. But the moment the laughter faded, she felt the ground beneath her feet tremble, a rumble like thunder drawing nearer, threatening to shake the very core of existence. A blinding flash streaked across the sky. The imposing oak trees flanked them like towering sentinels, their twisted branches groping at the air, almost as if they were alive, reaching out. Sarah felt her heart pound in her chest, a staccato rhythm of fear mirroring the wild dance of shadows around them. "Mom, what if they come after us?" Kyle asked, eyes wide with terror. The innocent question seeped into Sarah's heart, twisting it with worry. "I won't let them." The promise escaped her lips, but she wasn't sure if she believed it. The forest had a way of consuming promises, twisting them till they choked on hope. They hurried onward, desperate for the familiar comfort of their home. The houses of Maple Grove appeared ghostly in the distance, dim lights flickering like dying stars. Yet as they neared, a sense of dread slithered back into her. What if the darkness had followed them? What if they were never free? As if summoned by her very thoughts, a chill swept through the air. The laughter transformed into whispering voices, overlapping but clear. "You never left, you belong to us now, Mom." Kyle screamed, and without warning, he broke free from her grasp. In a moment of frantic instinct, he darted into a narrow alleyway between two houses that skirted their block. "No, Kyle." Panic gripped her as she followed him, but darkness pooled everywhere, closing in, swallowing the light. The alley's walls seemed to push in around her, the air thickening, making it hard to breathe. "Kyle! Come back!" She could hear him ahead, breathing heavily, those whispers crackling at the edge of her awareness. "Kyle!" Her voice splintered against the walls of the alley, each call sounding less like a mother searching for her son and more like a desperate woman running from some vile fate. Then, just as suddenly as he had vanished, Kyle's voice broke through the air again, higher and filled with confusion. "Mom, I can't see." Fear clawed at Sarah's throat, choking back her words. "Stay where you are." She rushed forward but stumbled as the darkness thickened around her like an encroaching fog. The laughter erupted again, boiling over, gorging on her panic. Just then, a cold, slimy tendril crept around her ankle, anchoring her in place, trying to pull her back into the dark. She fought against it, pushing with all her strength, a primal scream tearing from her throat. In that moment, atop the cacophony of terror, she heard Kyle again, but this time his voice was different, his tone altered, a child's wonder replaced by something deeper, tainted. "Mom, I'm okay," she whimpered, tears stinging her eyes, as she felt the space between them growing wider. "No. Don't." The sounds around Sarah coalesced into chaos, a symphony of demonic laughter and haunting whispers as reality began to slip away. With one last desperate surge, she threw herself past the shadows that threatened to consume her. All she had left was the aching hope to find her son, but to what end? What awaited her in the abyss? As Sarah broke through into another bizarre reality, a fleeting thought crossed her mind: was Kyle still the same? The grip of the darkness tightened, pulling with an unbearable might as she stumbled forward, heart racing, not in fear but in anticipation. The unholy powers were awakening, and she was about to discover just how deep their connection ran. What awaited her on this twisted path, and would she find Kyle before it was too late? The answers awaited in the dark. The world around Sarah shifted as if the very fabric of reality had unraveled. She gasped, painfully aware of the dread swelling within. The air was electric, charged with an unspeakable energy that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. Each step felt alien, as if the ground beneath her was no longer the safe familiarity she once knew. "Mom," Kyle's voice bore an unsettling calm, rippling in the air like a whisper from the void. Yet it echoed with an unsettling warmth that pricked at Sarah's instincts. It wasn't right. "Mom, where are you?" "I'm coming, Kyle," she shouted, desperation clawing at her throat. Her heart thundered against her ribs, a frantic tempo against the sinister backdrop. The whispers swirled around her, weaving between her thoughts, reminding her that time was slipping away. As she moved further into the night, the alleyway morphed into a maze, every turn feeling wrong and twisted. The walls seemed to shift, bending and folding within themselves, altering her very sense of direction. Shadows danced in the corners of her vision, teasing her desperation. "Kyle! Damn it, where are you?" Then she felt it, a shadow skimming past her side. A primal instinct jolted through her, and she ducked instinctively, but the presence paused, hovering just out of reach. "You can't escape," the words slithered around her, wrapping tight, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She forced herself to steady her breath and pressed forward, her mind a frantic whirlwind. The laughter came again, filling the cracks of the alley with an overwhelming sense of hopelessness. "They're playing a game, Sarah. You're caught in the web. Stop it." She screamed, but her voice felt small against the cacophony. "Kyle! I'm right here." Each word echoed against the walls, but the darkness swallowed her cries before they could reach him. A flicker of movement caught her eye. In the distance, something flickered like a flame. "Kyle!" she shouted again, rushing toward it, her heart pounding louder with every hurried step. But as she approached, dread knotted in her stomach. The light danced and flickered, inviting yet sinister. "What's this?" she muttered to herself, hesitating. The flame wasn't real, it was an illusion, a lure designed to lead her away. "You aren't real." Rational thought barely clung to her anymore. She turned her back on it and pressed on, each moment stretching like an eternity. "I want to let you take him. I want to." Just then, a piercing shriek erupted from somewhere deep within the shadows. "Mom! Help me!" Kyle's voice, once again drenched in panic, cut through her, igniting a surge of adrenaline. She sprinted, each stride trembling between fear and determination. She stumbled into a small clearing, and for a moment, a chilling silence enveloped her. The moonlight shone brightly here, illuminating the grotesque shapes of twisted branches overhead. It created deceptive patterns on the ground, leading her deeper into the woods. In that brief silence, she caught a glimpse of movement, Kyle's small figure, darting toward her from a thicket. However, just as she reached out, the darkness around him shifted, warping his form until it melted back into the shadows. Her heart dropped, despair crashing over her like icy water. "No, no, no." Tendrils of darkness started creeping toward her, alive and writhing, pulling her back with ethereal grip. She fought, every muscle straining as she reached out again. "Kyle! I'm right here. I want to let go." Gripping the last trace of hope, she dug her feet into the ground, summoning the strength to break free. The void around her responded, the laughter morphing into a guttural roar of anger and frustration. And then, just as the shadows were about to consume her, a whisper floated above the chaos. "Stay with us, Sarah, you'll find him again." The urgency of her scream echoed into silence. She hesitated, heart racing. What choice lay ahead? Would she confront the darkness to save Kyle, or would this demonic force draw her deeper into its grip? The shadows danced, relentless, promising secrets lost in the dark. And as Sarah teetered on the edge of succumbing, she caught a glimmer of hope across the void, a possibility lingering just out of reach. But what awaited her in that shadowy abyss? Would she find her son, or unleash something far worse? A jolt sent Sarah spinning back, her mind racing through the shifting shadows. The whispering taunts escalated, now layering over each other, a cacophony of voices trapped in a twisted loop. "You will never find him," they sang. "He's ours now, no." Sarah choked out, her voice fighting to break through the din. The familiar panic constricted around her heart, but deep within, a flicker of rage sparked. She would not let the darkness win. It wouldn't grasp her son without a fight. The consuming tendrils began to narrow, their grip tightening around her waist like a snake. The shadows twisted into grotesque forms, faces contorted in pain and mockery. She forced her eyes shut, trying to silence them, to imagine herself somewhere safe, somewhere warm. But the darkness pressed in, urging her to lose herself in its depths. Enough! She roared, feeling a surge of wild energy at the back of her throat. She opened her eyes, locking onto a nearby shadow that seemed to pulse nearer, almost curious. "Show me my son." The words surged forth, flooding her with determination. The shadows hesitated, their movement stalling just a breath longer, then, without warning, the shadow shifted, splitting open like a curtain, revealing a path buried in the darkness ahead. It lingered, a wretched invitation. "Follow if you wish to find him." With no other option, she stepped forward, the tendrils loosening their grip slightly as they receded, reluctant to let her go completely. Her heart raced. "Kyle!" She pressed onwards, the passage felt unnatural, walls pulsating around her. With every step, memories swirled like a haunting melody, the laughter they shared, the stolen moments of joy. But those memories twisted, morphing into nightmarish visions. She saw glimpses of Kyle, his face twisted in confusion, calling out for her, trapped in a swirling darkness. "Mom, please hold on!" she cried, an urgency lacing her voice. The shadows thickened, coiling around her limbs, forcing her to slow. The air turned icy, wrapping her in dread. A figure appeared before her, a tall silhouette stretching across the path, its features obscured by darkness, yet somehow familiar. "Who are you?" Sarah stammered, instinctively recoiling. The voice that returned was an echo, distorted yet eerily soft. "I am the keeper of lost souls," it whispered, the air pregnant with gloom. "And you, Sarah, are not the first to search for someone lost in these woods." Fear coursed through her. "What did you do to my son?" "The shadows do not kill," they changed. The figure leaned closer, its breath cold against her skin. "Those who wander too far become part of the forest. Their essence feeds the darkness, enriching its power. You must decide, Sarah. Will you join them, or find another way?" "No." She felt her resolve harden, biting back the surge of icy despair. "I'm here to save my son. I won't give in. Curiosity and defiance both will lead you deeper." The keeper's voice rang hollow, and the path beneath her feet churned in response, threatening to swallow her whole. "What if I refuse?" she challenged, heart pounding fiercely. "Then you will remain ensnared forever." The figure began to dissolve into shadows, slipping back into the dark, leaving Sarah with the faintest outline of a grin on its face. In that chilling moment, she sensed a choice ahead, an unstable edge between hope and terror. Would she confront the keeper and risk losing her sanity, or would she press on into the dark void, hoping to find Kyle before the shadows consumed everything that was left of her? Her breath quickened, skimming the line between dread and determination. A faint wail broke the silence from deeper within the woods, drawing her closer. "Kyle!" As she took a step forward, the ground shifted beneath her, pulling her back. Would the shadows win, or would she discover the truth hidden beneath their layers of fear? The path warped and twisted like a living creature, every root and stone threatening to snag her feet as Sarah pressed onward. The echoes of her son's voice danced around her, teasing her sanity, urging her deeper into the shadows. Fear clawed at her mind, but the vision of Kyle kept her grounded. "Mom!" The sound reverberated, bouncing off the trees, taunting her presence. Each iteration seemed to bear a weight of desperation, wrapping around her heart like a vice. She stumbled forward, feeling the damp ground pull at her shoes, the chill turning into an almost tangible force, wrapping around her ankles like an anchor. She gritted her teeth, fighting the urge to succumb to despair. "I'm coming, Kyle!" she shouted, hoping her voice would reach him beyond the veil of darkness. Suddenly, the shadows surged around her, forming figures that whispered promises laced with malice. "Embrace the dark, join us, Sarah. No Her voice rang out sharp and defiant. "You're lying." The figures coiled closer, their breath sharp and cold, brushing against her skin. They were faceless, featureless, a raw manifestation of her fears. They laughed, a low, menacing sound that rippled through the air. She could almost see them, vaguely human shapes, their bodies melting and reforming, always shifting, never settling. As she forced them back with her will, the trees around her began to groan, their branches twisting grotesquely as if in protest. The shadows wailed, a chorus of grief and hunger that echoed off the trunks, enveloping her in a thick, suffocating fog. The air felt heavy, oppressive. Panic surged. "Stop!" She screamed, but the wailing only intensified, feeding the darkness. Then, in the midst of the chaos, she saw it, a faint, flickering light up ahead, almost like a candle beckoning from the edge of a nightmare. It stood in stark contrast to the consuming dark. "Kyle!" she cried, her heart leaping with hope as she sprinted toward it, but the shadows scrambled, claws reaching out, grasping her clothes, her hair each touch sending ice through her veins. She jerked away, pulling free, but the tighter she fought, the deeper they latched on. "Let go!" she shouted, her throat raw. "You can't have me. I want to let you take me." Suddenly, she felt a jolt of pain. A sharp prick at her shoulder distracted her, like an electric shock. Sarah turned, her eyes locking onto the shadow that had bit her, its mouth split into a jagged grin, toothy and dark. "Foolish woman," it whispered, voice seeping through her into the depths of her mind. "You will join us, one way or another." With a burst of adrenaline, Sarah yanked away from the creature, bolting toward the light. She had to get to Kyle, had to reach him before it was too late. As she neared the flicker, she could make out more details. The light radiated from an old lantern swaying, tethered to a gnarled tree, casting tremors of warmth amid the surrounding cold. "Mom!" A cry. So close. Her heart raced. Almost there. She lunged for it, practically praying the light wouldn't extinguish before she reached it. The shadows screamed, a collective roar of frustration, clawing at her back, a sensation of ethereal claws raking against her skin. The lantern glowed brighter, illuminating the dark like a beacon of hope. She reached her hand out to grasp it, and in that exact moment, the ground beneath her trembled violently. "No!" she yelled as she felt it begin to shift again and pull her away from the light. Desperation surged in her chest, filling her lungs. "Kyle!" she screamed, her voice cracking in a void threatening to swallow her whole. As shadows twisted and coiled around her, pulling her back with an unyielding force, Sarah faced the darkness with one last surge of willpower. Would she plunge into the very heart of the void, or could she find a way to snatch her son from its clutches? In the chaos, a new voice cut through the din, barely a whisper but sharp enough to pierce her heart. "You have a choice to make. Will you give in, or will you break the cycle?" The darkness shuddered with anticipation, and she felt its grip tighten. One last time. Would she shatter the dark's hold, or would she forever be lost in the shadows? It all hung in the balance, teetering on the edge. With a surge of fear clawing at her throat, Sarah felt the ground rip apart. The flickering light, once so close, faded like a dream grasped from sleep. The shadows chattered among themselves, dark laughter echoing in her ears as they pulled her down, deeper into their abyss. "Fight, fight!" The whispering voice beckoned, slicing through the confusion. "You must choose. But remember, every choice has a price." In the blink of an eye, Sarah was teetering on the edge of a cliff made of swirling shadows. The figures around her altered their forms, morphing into grotesque imitations of faces she recognized, her neighbors, her friends, even distant relatives whose laughter had once warmed her heart. They reached out, their expressions twisted with a desperate need. "Join us, Sarah!" they cried, their voices a haunting melody of sorrow and deceit. "We've always been here. Together we are stronger." She felt a sharp pain in her heart, memories flooding back, a sweet summer barbecue, the crackling laughter of children playing in the yard, the warmth of a family gathering. "No. You're not real. She screamed, fighting back against the specters. You're just shadows. You're lies. But with each denial, the figures sharpened, their longing becoming palpable. They stretched their arms out further, pulling on her as if trying to drag her into their puppet show of grief and despair. She could feel their sadness wrapping around her, a blanket of cold and regret that threatened to choke the breath from her lungs. Why fight this? They whispered in unison, their voices layered, creating a dissonant tune that sent shivers racing down her spine. All you'll find in the light is pain, but in the dark, you'll find acceptance. The ground began to quiver beneath her, and panic surged. She glanced up, heart racing, spotting the lantern in the distance again, a beacon fighting against the tide of shadows. Kyle! She shouted, forcing the name past the panic that threatened to drown her. A flash of movement caught her eye. The lantern flickered violently as if sensing her desperation. She grasped onto that small hope, using it as a lifeline. No! She screamed at the shadows. You want to take me. I want to let you take my son. With fury igniting within her, Sarah pushed against the relentless tide of darkness. She kicked, flailing against the creatures dragging at her with a primal instinct. Splashes of her voice broke through the hollow whispers, her will forming a barrier against the insatiable hunger. Then, just as she felt the shadows about to pull her under entirely, she glimpsed a figure, a child, pale and small, standing by the light source. Mom! Kyle's voice rang out, crystal clear, cutting through the fog of despair. A jolt of recognition surged through her. Everything flooded back: the sweet laughter, the late-night whispers, the promise to always protect him. Fueled by love and sheer will, Sarah surged towards her son, her pulse thundering in her ears as the darkness shrieked in fury, but the cliff crumbled beneath her feet, and as she lunged toward Kyle, spiraling shadows latched onto her legs. You can't escape! They cried in a chorus of anguish, claws scraping against her skin, pulling her back into their churning mass. No! I want to lose him! She screamed, desperation transforming her fear into power. As she lunged forward, time slowed. Would she reach Kyle, or would she be swallowed whole? The brink between salvation and despair blurred, and with one final grasp of hope, she felt herself teetering uncertainly. Then, darkness enveloped her, encasing her thoughts in a thick veil. When she came to, the air was still, but the shadows loomed ominously above. Sarah blinked, trying to gather her bearings, and a terrible realization dawned upon her. Where was Kyle? The shadows stretched closer, whispering secrets held tight to the ground. Her heart sank, dread pooling in her gut. Was he lost in this realm? You made your choice, Sarah, the voices crooned, satisfaction dripping from their tones, filling the air with an unsettling thrill. But the game isn't over yet. A chill shot through her as fear gripped her again. There was more to uncover, secrets this dark would never die easily. She took a shaky breath, determination warring with dread. What lay ahead in these haunted woods? Sarah gathered her strength, steeling herself for the trials that awaited in the relentless darkness. But would she ever really find Kyle, or had the shadows already claimed him? The air thickened around her, pressing against Sarah's chest like a weight she couldn't shake off. Shadows coiled tighter, grotesque tendrils curling in on themselves as if anticipating her next move. She felt their eyes watchful, hungry. Every breath she took was a reminder of her isolation, the emptiness swallowing her whole. Fight back, find the light, the whisper came again, more insistent. But how? Desperation clawed at her throat, and the chilling images of her son's frightened face filled her mind. Sarah's thoughts raced, piecing together the fragments of her memory. The lantern, she could find it again. It flickered with warmth, a beacon of hope in the dense dark. With measured breaths, she stepped carefully away from the edge of despair, feeling the shadows writhe beneath her feet. Each inch forward felt like threading a needle, a whisper away from losing herself to their sinister grasp. Kyle! I'm coming! She called out, breaking the silence that threatened to erase her existence. The shadows hissed in response, a low growl that reverberated through her bones. You think you can defy us? You're part of us now, they taunted, their voices weaving through the air, sharp and cruel. But Sarah's resolve hardened. She shone her mental flashlight into the dark, searching for the outline of that flickering light. I won't lose you. She promised, her voice threading through the sinister tide. A sudden rush of wind swept through, chilling her to the bone, but she pressed on. Each step felt like walking through molasses, but it was progress nonetheless. The sounds around her shifted. The laughter of her loved ones turned into cries, then howls of despair. Join us. You belong here. They begged, their tones warped and sorrowful. The faces emerged again, each one an echo of something once cherished, now twisted in pain. She stumbled, fear clawing at the edges of her heart. No. She shouted, shaking her head violently. You're not real. You can't have me. The darkness shuddered, a swell of anger rising up around her. For a moment, that anger turned to a quiet, unsettling tranquility, and the shadows fell silent. Sarah dared to hope she had caught their attention, that perhaps a path lay open for her to find Kyle and break free. But the peace was fleeting suddenly, claws ripped at her sides, pulling her backward. You made a choice, Sarah. You cannot escape what you are. The shadows screamed. Panic surged, a fresh tide bursting through her veins. Where is my son? She screamed, her voice echoing frightened across the expanse. Where you left him, the shadows laughed, a cruel chorus that sank into the very marrow of her bones. He is part of us now, too. The words crawled under her skin, and Sarah felt the walls of despair closing in. In a moment of madness, she pressed her hands against her face, willing the memories to flood her senses. Laughter, love, warmth, all were vanishing as she stood toe-to-toe with impending doom. Find the lantern. She whispered through trembling lips. A memory shimmered in her mind as a soft glowing light surrounded by twisting branches. She had to find it. There was still a chance, if she could wrest Kyle from the abyss and fight the twisted reality taking hold. Gathering every shred of courage, Sarah dashed through the darkness, feeling the shadows scrape against her as she moved. But each step seemed impossibly heavy, each movement weighed down by an unseen force. The call for her son echoed louder and louder as if the shadows were sampling her desperation, ready to snuff it out. Then, amidst the chaos, she saw it a flicker in the distance, the lantern's soft light cutting through the dark like a knife. Kyle! She cried, her heart racing with renewed hope. She sprinted toward it, but the shadows, determined not to let her go easily, unleashed their fury. Tendrils reached out, grasping at her feet, tripping her, pulling her. You can't run from the truth. They taunted, her lungs burned, the light danced just beyond her reach, and as she fought against their grip, she could hear soft whimpers, her son's faint cries. With one last desperate gamble, Sarah surged forward, knowing she had to break free from their grasp. But as she lunged, a wall of darkness formed, and she felt the air change. The shadows erupted with a bone-chilling wail, resonating with a pain that felt all too familiar. Keep going, Sarah. A faint voice urged through the chaos. You can do this. But would she? The light flickered, and suddenly everything went dark again, like a candle snuffed out in an icy wind. Left with only questions swirling in the void, Sarah fell, caught in a spiraling abyss that echoed with the cries of the lost. Where was Kyle? What price would she pay to bring him back? Falling. It felt endless, like an eternal void pulling her deeper into its embrace. Shadows whispered secrets around her, their cruel laughter echoing like a mocking choir. You're trapped, forever. Suddenly, she landed hard against cold, damp earth. Pain shot through her knees, but she couldn't let it stop her. Sarah pushed herself up, scanning her surroundings. The darkness was even thicker here, swirling and pulsating as if alive. She gasped, feeling the weight of despair threaten to drag her under once more. Find the lantern. The whisper surfaced again, faint, but determined. Each beat of her heart echoed in rhythm, urging her to act, to chase that flicker of warmth she remembered so vividly. With shaky breaths, she took her first shaky step, chill biting through her. The taste of fear was acrid in her mouth, but she pressed on. The sounds around her twisted into a cacophony, a rush of voices calling her name, mocking her efforts. "Sarah, you're one of us now," they hissed, and her breath caught. "Shut up!" she yelled, clenching her fists. "You're just shadows, nothing but shadows." More darkness swelled around her, growing dense and suffocating. She stilled, focusing hard on the memory of the lantern. Its glow warmed her from within, that promise of safety, of her son. "Kyle needs me," she whispered to herself, conviction rebuilding more effectively than any shield. Suddenly, a flicker caught her eye, darting playfully in the distance. Was it real this time? "I can still turn this around," she murmured, hardly believing her own voice. And with that sliver of hope, she broke into a run, dodging tendrils snaking towards her, claws out like living nightmares. The shadows screamed, anger pulsating through their combined forms. "You cannot escape, Sarah. You're ours." But determination ignited her. She had come too far to be dragged back. The light ahead shimmered, beckoning her forward. The ground dipped beneath her feet as if trying to consume her. She stumbled, her foot catching on something sharp. Gritting her teeth against the pain, she pushed it aside, propelled by a desperate need to reach what could save her son. "I won't give up. I won't let you win." With the chant echoing through her mind, the glow intensified, illuminating her path through the dark. Kyle's cries grew louder, tangled up with the shadows around her. She could feel his fear, palpable and suffocating. "I'm coming, baby. Hold on." She screamed back, her voice cracking. As Sarah lunged forward, the ground shifted, crumbling beneath her. The light flickered wildly, almost mocking her efforts. For a brief moment, she hesitated, heart pounding in her throat. Then, she leaped for it. The shadows screeched, their voices a tempest of rage. "You think you can escape? He is ours." Her fingers brushed against a cool surface, the lantern. She grasped it tightly. In an instant, the light erupted with fire, driving back the darkness like a flare in the night. Shadows hissed and recoiled, losing their grip on her. "Don't you dare!" they shrieked, desperation clawing at their voices. She could see now the space around her flickering into shapes, through the veil of darkness. Every shrouded figure she fought so hard to escape twisted into a familiar echo, friends, family, all lost in this cursed expanse. Sarah's heart tightened as she searched for Kyle among them, dread pooling like ice in her stomach. "Where are you?" she breathed, light illuminating her surroundings but also revealing the terrible truth, every familiar face twisted in horror, eyes pleading for release. Would she have to choose one to save? The lantern's brightness intensified, casting harsh shadows on the grotesque them. "Make your choice, Sarah." The darkness thundered, a voice that sounded eerily like her own. "Will you save them? Or him?" The weight of that decision crashed down on her. Every loving memory surged back, dancing in her mind, flooding her with nostalgia and guilt. Could she sacrifice the many for the one? Torn between love and despair, Sarah stood paralyzed. What if the choices she found amidst the shadows would haunt her forever? Would any of them make it back? As the darkness surged once more, furious, ready to reclaim what it believed was rightfully its, Sarah realized she might have to lose everything to save the one thing she loved most. But what shadows would she have to live with if she succeeded? "Mom!" The panicked shout broke through the din of despair, reverberating in Sarah's heart. She turned, frantic, but hesitation gripped her with a vice-like grip. The lantern glowed fiercely in her hands, illuminating the grotesque scene around her, the writhing shadows that clawed at her soul, but more importantly, the anguished faces of those she loved. It was like staring at a twisted family portrait, each figure an echo of her past, twisted by the darkness that consumed them. "Mom! Help me!" Kyle's voice was a siren call, cutting through the fog of confusion. He was close, she could feel it too close. "Hold on, baby!" she screamed, the lantern's light flickering defiantly in her grip. "I'm coming." With a renewed sense of purpose coursing through her veins, she sprinted toward the pleas, ignoring the gnarled hands grasping at her ankles. They tore at her clothes, grotesque faces merging into her memories, trying to pull her back into despair. "You can't save him, Sarah." They hissed, their voices a discordant symphony. "You belong here. You belong with us." The shadows shifted, fluttering like leaves caught in a storm, swirling and shrieking around her. The faces of neighbors, friends, relatives morphed into a sea of sorrow, each of their trapped expressions etched with regret. "You think you can just leave? You chose this." They wailed, their hollow voices echoing in her mind, feeding her fear. But Sarah levied the flicker of hope, the glowing lantern like a sword, pushing back against the deluge. "No," she declared fiercely, eyes narrowing. "I want to live in your lies." The light burst forth, brighter than ever, illuminating the path that led to her son. She forced her way through the nightmare, each step becoming a battle against the shadows that filled her lungs with dread. "Mom!" His voice trembled, a desperate plea, pulling her closer. Through the chaos, Sarah locked eyes with Kyle, his face pale, panic imprinted on every feature. "I'm right here." The shadows raged, tendrils curling and snapping toward her. "He is ours." They thundered, and for an instant, doubt crept in like a thief. Was their claim unbreakable? Would the darkness pull her into its perpetual abyss? "No." Sarah screamed defiantly, wrapping her fingers tightly around the lantern. "He is my son. I will fight for him." Summoning everything she had, she surged toward Kyle, the light exploding like a star against the consuming dark. In that moment, she felt the shadows recoil, gasping as if struck. "You can't. You must choose." They hissed, their chorus dissonant and frantic, but Sarah pushed on, her heart pounding in sync with every desperate shout of her son. "Almost there," she called, breaking the suffocating quiet between their voices. As she reached out, shadows erupted around her, forming a barrier of despair, attempting to snatch Kyle away as they clawed toward him. Sarah lunged, arm outstretched, her breath hitching as she felt the heavy grip of shadows trying to hold him. "Kyle! Take my hand." He stretched out, trembling but resolute. With every ounce of strength, she pulled him toward her. The darkness screamed, a chilling wail that echoed through the dim air, feeling closer and closer to enveloping them both. The moment their fingers touched, an electric shock surged through her in pure connection. The lantern pulsed violently, its light cutting through the void like a razor. "Run!" Sarah shouted, pulling Kyle close, desperately fleeing through the gnashing shadows. The creatures shrieked in fury, grasping at them, but the light of the lantern blazed brighter, swatting them aside like fireflies. They felt their grip weaken, their voices fading to a pained hush. "You want to escape." It roared, a last-ditch effort to ensnare her. As the shadows faded into the ether, Sarah ran, urging Kyle to keep pace, and together they sprinted through the vortex of dark, ignoring the shrieks and whispers behind them. "Don't look back. Just focus on the light," she instructed, shutting her eyes momentarily to drown out the cacophony of lost souls. As they neared the boundary of the woods, the air shifted. Thick shadows pulling away as if fleeing from light. Sarah's heart raced, they were almost free. She threw herself forward, holding Kyle close, breathless. Finally light. The edge of the woods glimmered faintly, each step pushing her closer to salvation. Together, they burst out into the clear night air, bodies colliding with soft grass, collapsing into the fields of Maple Grove. The cold air was sharp, yet alive. She gazed up at the stars, unsteady and panting, relief flooding her as something heavy lifted from her heart. Kyle lay beside her, eyes wide, searching as if he had just woken from a terrible dream. "Mom, we did it," he murmured, voice hoarse, still lost in disbelief. Her heart swelled with love and gratitude. But somewhere deep inside, she felt it, a lingering shadow, a whisper of promises still unkept, a reminder that the woods would always hold some part of their story. "Yeah, we did," she whispered back, squeezing his hand tightly. "But promise me, no matter what happens, we stick together." "Yes, I promise," he replied, determination flickering through his voice. And in that moment, bathed in starlight, they both understood. They had fought shadows, but the real battle would be against the whispers of their fears, pushing forward wherever their journey might take them. They stood, side by side, ready to face whatever lay ahead. With resolve growing, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Let us go home." And as they wandered away from the haunted trees and into the welcoming warmth of their town, the night felt lighter, no longer a dark canvas painted by whispers and shadows. It felt like a promise, a chance to reclaim the light that as the moon rose high, illuminating the path ahead. They vanished safely into the night, hearts brimming with the kind of hope that only comes when shadows are finally left behind. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss future exclusive stories like this one. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about the ending. It matters. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is what keeps us going, and only true fans understand the importance of this.